I've been watching speeches all day from the UN General Assembly in New York City. It's the 80th anniversary of the founding of the UN, so this UNGA, to give it its abbreviation, is getting more attention than usual. Um, I've been following a website called, I think it's DWS. If I've got that right, don't quote me on that. It may D something, but anyway, they've had a lot of speeches that wouldn't otherwise be automatically available. I mean, it's sort of one after another, so you could just, it's pretty much every country represented, so it's a useful source to go to. And some stand out. The big focuses are on issues of climate change, Israel and Gaza, the recognition of Palestine, Russian aggression in Ukraine, and flights over the Baltic states. Those are the dominant issues at this UN General Assembly, but there's lots of other things as well that have been brought up. It would be impossible to make one video about absolutely everything that was covered. One notable thing, just before I forget it, is that the Indonesian president, Prabowo Subianto, has recognised Palestine. Of course, they already did, but has also welcomed this wave of recognition to Palestine and argued for the security of Israel, and has announced that Indonesia now recognises Israel, which was not something that was previously done by Islamic countries, at least not universally. So it's an important speech, and it shows that actually a two-state solution is as much in Israel's interest. Okay, without further ado, I want to talk about Donald Trump's claim to have ended 7 conflicts. CNN has a good write-up on this, so I'm just going to read it out, but it's firstly false. Let's just say that right off the top, it is false. Trump and some of his team we have to be absolutely fair, got involved in peace negotiations in several long-running conflicts, and there's been varying degrees of success with that. So credit where credit's due. However, I would be cautious about giving Trump too much credit. And this is why, since he started getting into politics back in 2015, he pitched himself as being against forever wars. And he lambasted the Biden administration for what was a chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, often compared to the fall of Saigon, the fall of Kabul in 2021. But I'm not sure that Trump would have done it any differently. In fact, Trump was pushing for an even earlier withdrawal, so that claim is dubious. But this argument that he's a peacenik and he's a great peacemaker deserves some scrutiny. In his first term, he took military action against the Assad regime. Now, I happen to think that was justified, but it simply counters the claim that Trump never got involved in military action, because he did. He also claimed that he never started a war and, compared that disparagingly to Obama. But Obama had 2 consecutive terms. Basically, Trump's claims start to unravel. This idea that he's some sort of peacenik. He used military action in Afghanistan against ISIS, and indeed in Syria. Today, the 2 most talked about conflicts in the world, Ukraine and Gaza, let's look at Trump's record there. And of course, there's other wars going on in the world. There's some very major wars going on in the world. Sudan, the DRC, and Syria is far from peaceful. And there's other examples, Myanmar. But let's just focus on those 2. Trump's record in Ukraine has been very inconsistent. It's true that he's toughened his stance recently, but it feels far too little too late. I mean, for years, Trump was parroting Kremlin propaganda. His ties to the Kremlin are still frankly questionable. And only a few weeks ago, he allowed Russia's murderous dictator onto American soil. He gave Putin international prestige by doing that. And that summit, nothing was achieved other than Putin buying time. And it reminds me a bit of the summit he had with Kim Jong-un in 2018, the Korean summit. Again, the optics were impressive, but it didn't really achieve anything. It just allowed Kim Jong-un to build more time. Yes, he's toughened his stance on Putin recently because maybe Trump has finally realised that Putin is the obstacle to peace. Although he still blames the victims, he still says this is Biden and Zelensky's war. You know, the way Trump has treated Zelensky is a disgrace. Um, so I certainly don't think we can talk about Trump being a peacemaker in Ukraine. Gaza. I mean, this is the most glaring thing of all. Without American support, Israel couldn't do what it's doing. That's a fact. Okay, that is a fact. So, without question, thousands of Palestinian deaths are on the hands of the American administration. Yes, Israel has done it, but it's American weapons and it's American sanctioning of what Israel is doing. The United States of America is the one country in the world, the one country that basically gives Israel a blank check. It's true that there are other countries that have armed Israel, but even they, I'm thinking of Germany for example, and indeed the UK, have toughened their stance recently because they recognise this is an unsustainable situation. Um, Basically, Israel is polarised. The only ally it has happens to be the world's most powerful country, and so that is a moral failure of the Trump administration. I mean, I think this is an administration that is lacking morals anyway, but that's so for Trump to actually lobby the Nobel Committee to say that he wants a peace prize when he is funding the genocide in Gaza. I just think it's repulsive that he actually, in a meeting with Netanyahu, said, I'm not trying to be a smart guy, but this would make great real estate. And he has the arrogance to call himself a peacemaker. Thousands of Palestinian civilian deaths are at the hands of Israel, but also at the hands of the United States. I have to be honest, Britain's not innocent in this. We did also arm Israel to a much, much, much smaller extent than the United States, but we're not innocent in this. We've, I think, taken the right stance now, but we're not totally innocent. But yeah, the United States, for Donald Trump to call himself a peacemaker, that summit, you know, in Chequers, when he kept talking about October the 7th, it was such gaslighting, you know, to always bring this up and to ignore what Israel is doing every single day in Gaza. Civilians slaughtered every single day. So I want to, you know, if you stop watching the video now, that's a bit to take away. Trump is not a peacemaker, at least not in Gaza, he isn't. I mean, if you want to be a genuine peacemaker, you do it across the board. Someone like Marty Ahtisaari, the late Finnish statesman, deserves a lot more credit in this regard than Trump does. But I'm going to just break down CNN's analysis of this because they go into each of these conflicts Trump claimed he ended. The report is by Ivana Kotasova. US President Donald Trump all but nominated himself for the Nobel Peace Prize on Tuesday, claiming in his address, this was his erratic address at the UN, that he has ended 7 unendable wars which were raging with countless thousands of people being killed. I ended 7 wars and in all cases they were raging with countless thousands of people being killed. This includes Cambodia and Thailand, Kosovo and Serbia, the Congo and Rwanda, a vicious violent war that was Pakistan and India, Israel and Iran, Egypt and Ethiopia, and Armenia and Azerbaijan, Trump said in his remarks. The last time I mentioned that conflict, he couldn't even get them right. He spoke about Armenia and or Azerbaijan, I think he called it, and Albania. I mean, Trump's cognitive decline is becoming obvious when he's mixing up countries. He's basically come out with the same stuff Biden did. And I do think Biden's age showed. The 2 conflicts that Trump so far has put the most efforts into ending, Israel's war in Gaza and Russia's war in Ukraine, continue to rage with no signs of easing, despite the myriads of deadlines, threats and promises he has made to get ceasefire agreements. But the failure to get a real deal in the Middle East and Ukraine has not stopped Trump from boasting about the conflicts he has ended. Trump has repeated this claim since earlier this summer, and the White House provided a list of the 7 claimed bilateral agreements last month. While he certainly contributed to broken a couple of agreements, between long-standing foes, his role in securing ceasefires in some of the other conflicts he has boasted about ending has been disputed by some of the countries involved. And then, of course, there are the wars that were not happening when he claims to have ended them. I'm going to continue in a second, but just to mention, American presidents who have got a claim as peacemakers include Bill Clinton with the Oslo Accords and Jimmy Carter with the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt. Okay, to continue. Armenia and Azerbaijan. Trump certainly deserves credit for hosting the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan at the White House in August, where they finalised a peace agreement which they first announced some 5 months earlier. The two former Soviet republics have been locked in a conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh for almost 4 decades. The breakaway region in the Caucasus Mountains is home to around 120,000 ethnic Armenians, and while it is internationally considered as part of Azerbaijan, it was controlled by Armenian separatists since the fall of the Soviet Union. That changed in 2023 when a lightning 24-hour assault saw Azerbaijan regain total control of Nagorno-Karabakh, prompting the region's ethnic Armenian population to flee to Armenia within a week. They also had a pretty deadly war in 2020. Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev both praised Trump for his role in getting the deal signed, even if he later, while talking about confused Armenia for Albania, and called Azerbaijan Azerbaijan. While undoubtedly a step forward, the agreement has not been ratified by either country. Several issues remain to be resolved, most notably Azerbaijan is demanding that Armenia changes its constitution, a move that would likely be rejected by Armenian voters in a referendum. Cambodia and Thailand. The 508-mile border between Thailand and Cambodia has been prone to flare-ups of violence for decades. Cambodia has previously sought a ruling from the UN International Court of Justice over disputed areas, but Thailand says it does not recognise the court's jurisdiction and claims that some areas along the border were never fully demarcated. The most recent round of violence erupted in July when at least 38 people, mostly civilians, were killed and hundreds of thousands were forced to flee their homes. Trump held separate phone calls with the leaders of the two countries, threatening to stop trade negotiations if they didn't agree to a ceasefire. The two sides met in Malaysia within days and agreed to a ceasefire. However, the conflict over the contested border remains unresolved, even though Cambodia's Prime Minister Hun Manet said that he nominated the US President for the Nobel Peace Prize. In that conflict also, Thailand's young Prime Minister, Praitantong Shinawatra, she had to resign after she made what was seen as a subservient call to Cambodia's leader, calling him uncle. Israel and Iran. When the US President announced a ceasefire between Israel and Iran after 12 days of fighting in June, let's not forget America has total bias towards Israel, so that already makes the claim flawed. It looked a bit premature as both countries continued with their final attacks. However, the two countries did later endorse a ceasefire. The direct confrontation between the long-time foes started when Israel launched surprise attacks on Iranian military and nuclear facilities that killed prominent politicians, military leaders and nuclear scientists. Iran responded with waves of missile and drone strikes against Israeli cities and military sites. While Trump made it clear he was initially against Israel attacking Iran directly, the US joined and bombed Iran's main nuclear facilities with its uniquely powerful bunker-busting bombs. Like with many of the other conflicts he claimed to have ended, Trump's role in bringing the violence to an end is unclear. No peace agreement or a firm deal on the future of Iran's nuclear program has been reached, and both Iran and Israel threatened each other since then. And of course he's totally biased to Israel, so it's, if you're truly a negotiator, you don't go in firmly on one side. As much as, that's no endorsement of the Iranian regime, but, America is not neutral on that conflict. India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan got embroiled in their most intense conflict in decades in May, after India fired missiles across 9 sites in Pakistan in response to a massacre of tourists in Indian-administered Kashmir, which India blamed on Pakistan. The conflict was raging for several days when, out of the blue, Trump announced on social media that the US had broken an end to the fighting. There are conflicting accounts of how the ceasefire was negotiated. Islamabad praised US involvement and nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize for what it said was decisive diplomatic intervention. India downplayed Trump's involvement, saying instead the ceasefire was agreed directly between the two countries. India has fiercely resisted any foreign intervention on the issue of Kashmir, the disputed region over which India and Pakistan fought several wars, insisting it's not up to other countries to get involved. And, that's a bit rich from New Delhi, considering they're both nuclear powers. I mean, they have to understand international concern. Just briefly on India, I think it's right to put pressure on India over their support for Russia whilst they claim to be neutral. But yeah, that's something where there could be useful leverage regarding pressure on Putin. Rwanda and the DRC. This is another one that Trump can mix up. He doesn't seem to understand that the Democratic Republic of Congo, formerly Zaire, isn't the same as the Republic of the Congo, i.e. Congo-Brazzaville. When the representatives of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda signed a peace agreement brokered by the US in June, it was hailed by Trump as a great day for Africa and, quite frankly, a great day for the world. However, there is little to suggest that the conflict, one of the most protracted and complex conflicts in the world, is easing in any way. Scores of militia groups that have fought for 3 decades are still engaging in deadly fighting. CNN visited the rebel-held city of Goma, home to more than 2 million people, earlier this month. Local people, aid workers and rebel leaders told CNN the fighting and the hardships caused by it continue. The same week, the UN and Human Rights Office, OHCHR, released a fact-finding report on the escalation of hostilities between January and July 2025 in North and South Kivu, the provinces in eastern DRC, where 2 of its largest cities, Goma and Bukavu, are located. And this year there's been many atrocities, including in recent weeks, so that conflict is far from over. Trump's right to say it's a hideous conflict. He's right to say it's a machete war, and those are very deep ethnic divisions that go way, way back, but it's far from over. Egypt and Ethiopia. It's unclear how exactly Trump ended this conflict, since Egypt and Ethiopia were not and are not actually at war. However, the two are locked in a bitter dispute over a massive hydroelectric dam that Ethiopia officially opened earlier this month, and they are worried that this rift could escalate. Sitting on a tributary of the Nile, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam took some 15 years to build, and the Ethiopians see it as a key to their future economic prosperity. Egypt and Sudan have long opposed the dam, arguing that it would negatively impact the availability of water downstream. Egypt has argued that under a colonial era treaty signed with Britain, it has the right to veto any projects on the Nile. So that's not a conflict that's happened yet, but it could break out. If Trump wants to be useful, maybe he can help de-escalate it. Talk to both sides in that sense, talk to Addis Ababa and Cairo in that sense. Serbia and Kosovo, another puzzling item on Trump's list of conflicts he has solved. Kosovo declared independence from Serbia in 2008, 9 years after NATO launched a bombing campaign against Serbian forces responsible for a brutal crackdown against ethnic Albanians in Kosovo. Serbia and Kosovo signed an economic normalization agreement during Trump's first term in 2020, but Serbia continues to view Kosovo as a breakaway state and does not recognize its independence. Tensions between the two countries continue to flare up every few months, with the European Union, which both countries wish to join, playing a key role in mediation. So that's the 7 conflicts. It's kind of 50-50 on that. Of those, probably the strongest claim would be Armenia and Azerbaijan. But even there, Trump's ego, comes into it. Apparently spoke about a highway being named in his honour. I'm never going to criticise any legitimate efforts to find peace. Some of these conflicts are long-running, thousands of people dead. Of course everyone will welcome peace in these long-running parts of the world. There is a conflict that ended this year that hasn't been claimed by Trump, and it was a long-running conflict that cost many lives. Turkey PKK. The Turkish-Kurdish conflict in that theatre. Over 40,000 dead in 40 years, since 1984. It's been a very deadly conflict, and that has ended this year. The PKK has laid down its arms and there's been a ceasefire. That's something to celebrate. A world that has a lot of conflict, that was something to celebrate. The ceasefire between Armenia and Azerbaijan is something to celebrate, but it's far from finalised. I think of all those things, it's the strongest claim that Trump has. The other one's dubious. This is not to criticise his efforts. If the US State Department's trying to get peace, genuine peace between these countries, of course it should be welcomed. And it is true some of the warring parties have seen Trump as helpful. Others have rejected that sort of accolades on Trump. And again, Ukraine and Gaza, Trump has enabled Putin, without question. He has blamed the victims. He's toughened his stance recently, but, this is coming after years of parroting Russian propaganda. And yes, it's true that both his first administration and the Biden administration has armed Ukraine. But when it comes to that issue, I think Trump's rhetoric on Russia is very, very inconsistent and at times has been very, very dubious. Put simply, I don't think Trump can be trusted when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. He's been more of a hindrance than a help. And when it comes to Gaza, this is the most glaring thing of all. American weapons have killed Palestinian children. Let's just put it bluntly. America has enabled Netanyahu's government. They've refused to condemn the excesses of the Netanyahu government. Trump's even suggested ethnic cleansing. So even if those other conflicts Trump can get some credit for, I don't think he should get the Nobel Peace Prize. Not so long as he is arming Israel. That would just be a mockery of it. Because the Trump administration unquestionably has blood over its hands over that conflict, even if we give him credit on some of those other areas and they're dubious. So I'll put a link to the article, but this claim that MAGA loves to say that Trump's a great peacemaker, it's dubious. And let's not forget another thing. You know, Trump's looking at a war now with Venezuela. Now, I'm no fan of Maduro. Maduro is a dictator. He has destroyed his country. Venezuela is a very grim place to live. Rampant crime, rampant inflation. Maduro has destroyed his country and he's not the legitimate leader of that country. Nevertheless, if Trump launches a war there, he can hardly claim to be a peacemaker. You know, whether it's justified or not, it's just, you can't say you're a peacemaker if you're about to engage in a war. I mean, it's, you know, that will be something that will really heat up and then other Latin American countries may be sucked into it. So basically Trump's record on this is very mixed. There has been genuine efforts from the State Department, we have to be honest about that, but the support for Israel, the support for effectively the genocide in Gaza should absolutely rule Trump out of ever getting the Nobel Peace Prize, even if there is a big peace agreement in another conflict. Until Washington strongly condemns Israel and joins the rest of the world in doing so, then Trump will not deserve the Nobel Peace Prize.